Hello and welcome back to the Modern Leader Way podcast, where I am joined by the beautiful Kari Russell. Hi, Kari.
Hello, hello.
So happy to get you on. I know we talked about this a couple of months ago, so we've waited it out for good reason. Because of the kind of theme I brought in on the podcast in January, which is all around reclaiming our voice and our expression as
Mm.
leaders. And also because I know you've just been through a big rebrand in your business. So we're going to hear all about that. But I guess I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself, but just by way of introduction from me, Kari and I have been working together for the last sort of 12 months or so. And I came across Kari, um, 12 months ago, and just everything she said on her social media just spoke to my soul about like where we're hiding parts of ourselves, where we're not being fully expressed. And she had this amazing brand where she talked about SX, and that was really very much code for self-expression. And that has evolved more recently, and she's going to talk about some of that. But I was really keen to have her on so that we could get really into the juiciness of kind of what does hold us back, where we are like making our own boxes to be in or making our own rules, and where we get to kind of break free of some of those things. So
Mhm.
let me hand it
Ah,
over to you to introduce yourself and also where you are in the world.
okay. Well, thank you for that introduction. And Emma, I just love you. And I'm so glad that you found me a year ago because I've adored working with you and getting to know you and seeing you expand and evolve and unlock your voice. And I know that like it's just the iceberg. It's just
Yeah.
the iceberg. There's so much. So, yes, I'm Kari Russell, and I work with women who truly want to free who they know that they're meant to be. That's really at like the core of what I do. And we do mindset work, emotional intelligence work, self exploration, identity work, visioning, looking at fears and blocks. We go into a whole bunch of different ways to really uncover what is holding someone back in their life, in their business, in their career, in their relationships. And I am in a very small little country town. It is Millbrook, Ontario, and I am just outside of Peterborough. And we moved here about 6 years ago, and it was probably one of the best things for my own self expression because we are surrounded by nature and we have the most incredible community of neighbors here. And so it's been being outside, surrounded by trees and trails. It has really connected me back to my own intuition and to my own creative chaos, I like to call it. And yeah, I'm so excited to be here, Emma, and I can't wait to dive deeper into this
Yes.
conversation.
Love that. And if anyone doesn't know where that accent or Ontario is from, it's Canada, right?
In
Not the
Canada, yeah, I
US,
didn't
like
even
I
say
kept
Canada.
mistaking
Yeah,
it
yeah, we're in Ontario, Canada.
for months. I think I
Yeah,
was assuming you were US, but I don't know why. That's my
yeah.
geography for you. Yeah. Um, And I was gonna something else was on the tip of my tongue there, but we'll come back to it. And just to like rewind a little bit, because you actually came from like I think you are very entrepreneurial, but you also came from a bit more of a kind of corporate, albeit in retail kind of background, didn't you? Where you were a leader yourself. So just tell us a little bit about the background story that's led you to doing this work.
Totally. Well, being completely, I've done everything under the sun. I've had every job under the sun. And I've always been an entrepreneur. I've had a business since I was a dog walker in grade 3, and I had flyers posted all around my neighborhood. And I was walking the neighborhood dogs. I had a tutoring business. I had a personal training business. So I've had lots of different businesses. So yes, being an entrepreneur, being my own boss, doing my own thing has always been part of me. But my I guess like my corporate or like retail kind of background is I was an assistant manager for a luxury retail wellness brand, where I started off as just a part-time floor worker after I had my daughter and worked my way up in the leadership and became their resident goal coach and people manager. And that's really where I kind of found my coach in me. It's always been when I was a personal trainer, it was always there, was always coaching people.
Yeah.
But it was at that role in my assistant manager role where I really unlocked the coach in me, where I really unlocked that leadership, that personal responsibility, that going first, that holding high standards, having uncomfortable conversations, really being able to see the potential in people and be able to communicate it in a way where they feel activated and expanded by that potential rather than, scared or not feeling good enough, that kind of a thing. So it was at my job as an assistant manager that I started coaching, and I started doing goal coaching workshops and visioning workshops and leadership workshops with my team. And then that's really what started my coaching business, was taking the work that I was doing with my team and bringing it out into the public. So,
Oh, I love that.
yeah.
I love that. And it resonates a lot as well because when I was in my corporate career, right, that's where I just found I was very natural at doing the coaching, and I was always sought out to be like a mentor. People wanted to know how I had kind of tracked this career up the leadership development path. So there's a big clues in that kind of thing, isn't it? In terms of like what comes most natural to you in your job and what you love, like what lights you up in that kind of leads you to potentially what else you could do beyond corporate, if that's ever
Exactly.
a
Yeah.
desire.
There was something that I learned while I was there, um, around the idea of finding our strengths, and this is really what kind of like shifted a perspective for me, is we can have strengths, but do we feel strong doing them? And the whole point of really unlocking our true authenticity and unlocking our self expression is not just relying on our strengths, the things that we're good at, that people see that we're good at. It's kind of one of those, like, just because I can doesn't mean I should.
Mhm.
For me, I really leaned into not only what I was good at, but what I felt strong doing. So I might not be the best on the team at it, but when I'm engaging in it, I feel like I'm so strong and powerful and in my element. So I think that that's one thing that really helped me start to see and really step into self ownership around the things that I could pull from my corporate retail experience into my business, into my brand, into my relationships with people in and out of that world.
Mm. Oh, I love that. So you started business around, was it Goals and Grapes that you said?
Goals and grapes, yeah, the
Your first
original name.
iteration of your
Yeah,
business. And it's evolved into that. And where did this whole self-expression piece come into it? Like what did you
yeah,
know, what themes were you picking up on? What did you notice as the common themes that were coming through that you were like, there is something in this, like a
yeah.
board for
Uh,
these women?
it's really hard to pinpoint the exact moment, because when I do reflect back on my life, I've always been, when I want to say like a sexual person, but you like, when I think back to my childhood, I was a ham. I wanted to be in front of the camera. I was always doing performances. I was the MC at the Christmas concert in grade 2 in front of the entire school. I always felt I loved doing oral presentations in class. I loved doing skits. Like, the expressive part of me was always there.
Mhm.
So it was, undoubtedly in part of everything that I did. But I do feel like when I hit my late teens, when my body started changing, when my, puberty happened into my early 20s, I started to lose that part of myself. And so it was through this goal coaching and through this self exploration work. And it was actually at an event that was hosted by the company I worked for, that they had invited me to after I stopped working for them, which was, again, like divine intervention, like, like
Mhm.
how things flow together. And I was listening to another coach speak, and he is very much about expression and very much about self exploration and inner work. And he asked like a simple question, like, where do you feel most alive? And I instantly had this remembrance of, like, I feel most alive when I have a microphone in my hand, when I'm using my voice, when I'm presenting, performing. And that was really the moment. It's like, I haven't been allowing myself to do that. I haven't been allowing myself to step into that expression. And so that, if I can pinpoint one exact moment in like my personal life, it would be that.
Okay.
And then in goals and grapes, and then moving into coaching women in business, really starting to see where their expression was being muted, was being tamed, was being, stifled because of who they thought they needed to be while building their business, what they
Mm,
thought they needed to do, and how they thought it should look. And that's where kind of like all my kind of experience and natural expression kind of came together, where it's like, oh my gosh, like these women are just, they're suffocating in these shoulds, in these rules that unconsciously, most of them, that's where they're living.
mhm,
And so that's where the SX, and when the SX came through, I was in my hot tub on my deck. I was what wasn't really first originally came through as audacity. That word came through me,
mhm,
and that and audacious and audacity, and I was like, what is this? What I'd never used that word before. I'd never really connected with that word before, and that was kind of like the light bulb moment of like, ooh, okay, this is the direction that I'm meant to be going in. And I'm not going to bore you, but there was many points in the last, I would say, 4 years where that audacity showed up in branding, in work, in programs, and it led to the SX, self-expression. And then as it's morphed again into the new
love
iteration.
it. It's
Yeah.
so cool. So as you were talking about like you were always like you felt comfortable with a mic in your hand, I was getting these feelings coming up like I wasn't necessarily ever that um confident in public, but I was behind closed doors. Like
Mm-hmm.
we've had this conversation in some of the groups that you created. Like I was, Kylie Minogue in my days, with my hairbrush in front of the mirror. And as a gymnast, I was um, very happy to show off in my craft, like with my
Mm-hmm.
ability as a gymnast. But put me in front of a room to speak, and I would definitely be a bit more of a shell. And I think it's so interesting how we lose that, like you say,
Mm-hmm.
that audaciousness from
Yeah.
a child to like just going through those really tricky, potentially teen years into our early 20s. So what are some of the things that come up for you in terms of like what shuts us down, what makes us lose those parts of us or hide and put those bits in a box and throw away the key almost?
Yeah. I think that it so much of what you say there about being like the athlete, like I feel like I just want to touch on that before I
Mm,
answer your question. The gymnast. And I think it's so important to acknowledge those parts of ourselves that aren't necessarily like for business or like for our gifts and our coaching and stuff, but the leadership, the performance aspect, the being willing to show up and make a mistake in front of everybody and to keep
mm,
going, like that is a big part of like that's one of those strengths or those skills that we can pull from now as adults. Like when we think about the things that we forgot about that we were good at or that we enjoy doing as kids, part of
mm,
the work I do with my people is having them go back in time, remembering those parts of themselves that they've quieted down. There's many different reasons why that happens, but there's parts of those identities from our past that are just waiting for us to pick them back up and put them back on. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. And
great.
then when it comes to like what I feel, again, looking from like childhood to adulthood, I think as children, we're definitely more self-centered. We're definitely more like we don't even notice what anyone else is doing. We're
Mm,
so, egocentric. And so we're not even concerned with what other people think of us. We're just so ego driven, so focused on doing what we want and how we want it because that's what feels good for us. But then as we get older and we start to notice and we start to like look around and pay attention to what other people are doing, how other people are reacting to us, how they're receiving us. This is what really, instead of us being, we start worrying more about other people than ourselves. And we
mm,
start looking outside of ourselves for that validation and for that confirmation that what we're doing is right or wrong. And obviously, there are so many influences in this: our parents, our teachers, our friends, our siblings, our extended family. So we're always at this, like, the helm of receiving projections from other people. We're always receiving conditioning from others. So I think the it's because of all that that we start to shut down because it feels safer. We say I want the attention, but we only want certain kinds of attention. And so it really comes down to re-strengthening that personal power, that emotional intelligence, that groundedness, that conviction in who we are and how we want to be showing up. And so I talk a lot about with the women that I work is we've got to become selfish again. We've got to become self-centered again. We've got to become self-obsessed again. We've got to be willing to go in and forget about other people, not because we're uh, bypassing that process, because I do feel like there is so much wisdom in paying attention to where we're scared of judgment, what we're worrying about, what other people are think. That's all just a mirror back of what's coming out of our own subconscious. But I think it's this willingness to go back in time and to become more self-centered, that will allow us to unlock everything that we've either buried deep within, that we've quieted down, that we've shamed. Because I know that's the process that I had to go through. I had to really stop, really acknowledge where I was putting other people's opinions ahead of what I was experiencing inside, and really deciding to honor myself and to honor my voice and my message and my desires, and trusting that by doing that for myself, it would be possibility, it would be permission, it would be activating for other women who are experiencing the same thing.
Mm. Yeah, and it's so fascinating because we've obviously all got our very own personal stories and journeys that has led us to here. But like when I think of what shut me down, it was definitely like other kids, older kids, boys
Yes.
in particular, in the playground, and even like sort of in those mid-teens where it's like kind of and I think that's when I really sort of acted like I was confident, but inside I was really like struggling and suffering with this lack of validation that I was getting from my peers, from this like
Mm-hmm.
almost pushback. And I think that's when a lot of my kind of dumbing down, quietening down happened. But there's also in terms of like me using my voice to sort of say what I wanted or to say what I thought, like have opinions, that goes way, way back to
Mm-hmm.
having, a very prominent masculine role model in my life that was always right, that had a very loud voice and would kind of tell you, no, you're wrong. Sort of put yourself back in a box, little girl. Little girls are to be seen and not heard. And like that sounds quite extreme, but over time, that kind of did kind of quieten me down. So I think those combination of the two, like that really craving that validation from your peers in those
Mm-hmm.
really influential hormonal times in the playground, but also coming from this kind of, I guess, place where it wasn't really safe to have a view and to have a voice, really impacted then how I went into the workplace at 18
Mm-hmm.
with not much confidence other than this kind of mask that I put on. So I often talk about taking off that mask of fake confidence and bringing your whole self to the table. But that's a whole journey, right?
Yep.
So where do like I think when we talk about these kind of stories, it helps other people, the listeners maybe go, oh God, yeah, what was my kind of
Yeah.
point at which I might have like made myself smaller. And one way I've made myself smaller is actually by putting on weight, which sounds like a bit of a crazy, what's the word, dichotomy, but it's true
Yeah.
because actually when I'm bigger, I'm less, I don't know, less attractive maybe, or I'm not gonna call on the wrong attraction, if
Right.
that makes sense. So what are some of the ways that you start to pull out for people to help them sort of identify what is for them? Because I know we don't sort of hang out there. We kind of it's how we reclaim those parts of us and we move forward. But how do you start to help people kind of with that awareness?
Yeah, I think it's the conversation that we're having right now, but going back in time and really pinpointing those moments and really being able to, like, I talk a lot with my people about getting specific because so many people, it's like, I have a fear of being seen. Well, okay, like, what does that mean?
Mm,
Like, I can ask 10 people and they can all have that same fear of being seen, but underneath that fear of being seen, like, what is it? Is it really about being seen, or is it about being told that you're wrong, right? Is it really about being seen, or is it about overshining somebody else, not wanting to be too bright, and now somebody doesn't feel heard or seen by you? Do you really want to like be seen, like not be seen, or is it that you're scared that you're not going to be liked, that you're
mhm,
going to lose people in your life? So I think when it comes to working with individuals, and for the listeners here, I think it's really about asking yourself to like go deeper. Like, what does that mean? And the question that I always ask people is like, what are you making it mean? What are you making it mean? What are you making it mean? Okay, and then what does that mean? Okay, and then what are you making that mean? What does that look like and feel like?
mhm,
So it's really about going deeper into like, well, I don't, I'm scared of being judged. Okay, judged about what specifically? What
mhm,
is it that you are scared of being judged for? Well, I'm scared about being judged because of my I don't feel like I'm pretty enough. Okay, well, what does being pretty look like and feel like for you? Where were you told that pretty had to be a certain way?
mhm,
Or I'm scared of being judged because I don't want to look like I'm being selfish. Okay, where did you learn that selfish was being wrong? What does selfish look like and feel like for you? What does it mean when you put your desires first and make them a priority? So I think because when we talk about these conversations, people can connect and can see themselves in these stories, but it's so important to go deeper than that connection and to get to the specifics of what is actually happening.
yeah.
What is actually creating that dissonance in your body from wanting to hide, from wanting to cover up, from gaining weight, from, you know what I mean, from wearing loose and baggy clothes because that's what feels safe rather than clothes that you actually desire to wear, from you toning down your language. For me, I say fuck all the time, but some people would find that abrasive and find that off-putting. But if I change my language, I change the way that I want to communicate, then it's not my authentic expression coming through. So it's getting really under the surface of what is actually creating that fear, that block, that discomfort. And then I always like to say too, like, a lot of these things we feel shame, we feel guilt, we feel embarrassed about. We feel like we're the only ones experiencing these situations, or that we're the only ones who feel the certain way. And by having this open conversation and doing this work in group settings, you start to see that you're not alone. I've never met anyone who didn't have the fear of being judged. We all fear being judged, right? Like, all of these fears that we sometimes use as excuses, it's like I have a fear of being judged too, but I know that, like, I can sit behind that fear, or I can do the thing that I want to do. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
having the conversation and getting to the specifics, it creates it like removes the power of it from us, and we can regain our power within the fear, within the block, within whatever is surfacing for us.
Yeah. I love that. And actually, that question, that what you're making it mean, has like really stuck with me. And I actually use it a lot now myself with my clients, even.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's incredibly frustrating at first to have to be asked that, right? It's like, well, what do you mean? What am I making it mean? But
Yeah.
what that does do is it makes the word or the description really neutral, right?
Yes,
And it actually
exactly.
does make you go, oh yeah, because the next person might have a completely different definition of selfish, for example. Someone might say,
Right.
fuck yeah, I'm selfish. Of course I am. Because the opposite of that would be selfless. And who wants to be less of themselves? And
Yeah.
the next person would be like, oh no, I'm like, I come last, sort of thing. And it's so it really does help you look at those words completely neutrally and then like untangle that and redefine it, right?
100%.
I
Yeah.
love
And
that.
I
And
think,
then, oh, go on. What are you
no,
gonna
it's
say?
okay. Go ahead.
As you were talking as well, I was thinking, I was cast back to this weekend when I held my second retreat. and where I was cussing, like I was using the F word and stuff, and it just, but not for like, sometimes I do it for effect, but this was just like really natural, and it wasn't like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. And like I just felt like in those, me holding that group space, it's the most natural thing for me to do,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And it makes me think about these different versions of ourselves, right, that show up. So we do put these hats on. So you're a mum, I'm a fur mum, I'm
Yep.
a partner, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm an auntie. I'm all these different kind of roles and like play these different roles for other people. I'm a friend. Um, I'm a coach, I'm a mentor, I'm a retreat host, I'm a podcaster. And there's kind of like slightly different versions of me that I bring forward or that comes naturally in each of those situations, right?
Yeah.
And I bring this up because I know you talk about like I'll get you to talk about the versions of ourselves, but when I think about that version of me that showed up in my corporate career, there were a few different versions in that if there were people I felt very comfortable and safe with, they would see more of me than
Hmm.
perhaps someone that was a senior leader that I felt I had to then step into a different version of me. Like what is going on there when this is happening and like how tell us how you view this because I think it holds a different kind of meaning to a lot of what we might see out there around identity
Hmm.
and things like that.
Yeah, this I think this has probably been the biggest part of the identity work that I've done for myself personally, and really looking at what we've made and what society and what we hear, like the narrative of identity work and authenticity and self-expression. And there's this almost like this unspoken narrative that we should be able to be who we are in every environment, in every role, in every space or relationship. And that's to, I've come to, it's just not that it's not possible. It's just, it's so limiting by forcing ourselves to be the same way in every, like that to me feels inauthentic. Do you know
Mhm.
what I mean? Like when I'm at the soccer pitch with my son, I'm a soccer mom through and through, and I am like full in soccer mom mode. That's not who shows up on my coaching calls. Do
Mhm.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's not, I'm not coach Kari when I'm on the soccer pitch.
Yeah.
So a lot of this, the work that I've done and the perspective shifting that I've done around this is we have to stop seeing the fact that we show up differently in different places as something that's bad or wrong.
Mm.
It's not bad or wrong. You're not being fake. You're not being inauthentic. You're actually being the most authentic version of you in that environment, in that moment. Where the work comes in is when we can acknowledge that we're holding ourselves back.
Mm.
That it's not that we're being different or we're expressing ourselves differently in different spaces in different places. Like I chose to wear a sweatshirt today for this podcast episode. I easily could have put on a bodysuit and had, my cleavage all over the place. Like it really depends on how am I feeling? How do I want to express myself right now in this moment?
Mm.
Um, where the issue would be is if I felt like I had to cover up to come to this podcast episode, if I felt like I needed to wear something less revealing in
Mhm.
order to appear more professional or more appropriate. That's where we want to be looking at for these identity pieces. It's not the fact that we have these different versions of ourselves. Of course we do. We are multi-passionate, multifaceted. We're never the same person twice because our environment will always be different. The energy, the weather. Do you know what I mean? The song that's playing on the radio. Like I'm not the same.
Title, our moods, all the things.
Exactly. Like I really feel like the forcing or the pressure, and this is where I in that self exploration, the who are you, that question, it creates so much stress for people to answer.
Mhm.
And I've experienced that myself. Who am I? Who am I? Who am I? Like we're supposed to know who we are so that we can speak to and call in our people. But who you are, it's always changing and evolving. So it's about releasing the pressure to know who we are and to just be who we are,
Mm.
to just be who we are moment by moment by moment. And then paying attention to what's creating that the retraction or
Mm.
the restriction in that expression. That's what we want to pay attention to, not the fact that who I am with you here on this podcast episode looks and feels and sounds different than who I am when I'm snuggled on the couch with my son, or when I'm shopping with my daughter, or when I'm meeting girlfriends for drinks at the winery. Like that's not where the inauthenticity comes into play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
I
I
could
love
talk
that.
on that forever. So I'm just going to,
It
I'm
does.
very passionate about this because I feel so many women feel that they need to be one version, right? It's this or that. And it's not, it's this, that, all and both, total, whole, all.
Yeah. Who
Yeah.
am I being right here, right now?
Yes.
And is there any holding back, any force, any like resistance, any
Right.
whatever, making myself small coming up?
Yeah.
And I think that's really kind of key. Also, for my listener that's likely to be sat in, senior leadership team meetings and sat around the boardroom. And a lot of the time, I get women that come to me, they are holding back from saying something that's on the tip of their tongue. Perhaps it's like a moral or an ethics kind of thing that they want to call out, but they don't feel safe enough to do. It's kind of like
Mm-hmm.
there are those kind of challenges that I think we come up against in corporate in that more kind of patriarchal, masculine kind of environment that
Right.
we're not necessarily going to change, but it's like, how do we just bring a little bit more? How do we choose our battles? How do we like choose our moments? And like, how do we know when it's like important to us
Yep.
that we don't walk away and let that stew? And I think that was always the thing for me was sitting in those meetings. Like I got like described as a bit of a barometer, so I could really sense check the mood in the room. I could tell that he over there was not happy. I could tell
Mm-hmm.
that that one had checked out over there, and that perhaps that one was just saying what they thought they needed to say to sort of please.
Yep.
But I had this like, I've really kind of felt like I had this good handle on what was going on in the room, but I could never call it because I never felt brave enough to like call it.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's where a lot of my I came up against myself, and like that's where I used to beat myself up for not having, not being brave enough or not like having a voice and like hiding and things like that. And then that's when all the imposter syndrome kind of thoughts come in. Like, I'm not cut out for this. I shouldn't be here. Like, they're going to take away my salary any day and like
Mm-hmm.
down a couple of bands. Like, what is your kind of approach and best advice for those kind of environments where it's tough, the environment is tough, the
Right.
circumstances are not something that you have much control over, but obviously you have all this kind of inner jostling going on about should I, shouldn't I?
Yeah. And I think so. There's a couple ways that I think about this. So we can't ignore the fact that when we are working for somebody else, there are rules of engagement that they have created that we then get to choose. Do we want to play? And so I think this comes down to us knowing like our own individual non-negotiables.
Mhm.
Where am I willing to, pick my battles? Where am I willing to, follow the rules of the corporation that I like? I think it's a gut check for ourselves first,
Mhm.
right? Because we can't control what other people are doing and other people are saying and how other people receive us. We can't control that. So
Mhm.
we have to decide for ourselves first. Like, do I desire to continue being in this environment? Am I willing? What are my non-negotiables? What are my core values? What are the things that I'm not willing to sacrifice on in my expression, in my responsibilities, my roles, what I'm doing, what I'm not doing. Really getting clear on that, on those non-negotiables for ourselves. So that the things that we can't control for the environments or the people or the spaces, we can shift our perspective around it. And I think a lot of the times, and I'm speaking to my own personal, like everyone has their own experience in corporate. And to be honest, like I don't think that I could call my role that I was doing a corporate role. I was lucky to be in a very uh, uh, um, accepting culture of a company that I worked for that really focused on leadership and personal responsibility and self ownership. But it's where we have to understand. It's like, what am I not willing to sacrifice on? And in the things that, okay, how can I shift my perspective around this? How can I see this? Not that I'm not being brave. It's not that I'm not being brave. It's that I'm not actually in an environment where my braveness, where my courage will be received. So it's like, am I going to waste my energy feeling bad and shitty about myself, or am I going to find different ways to use that bravery, to use that courage? So
Mm.
because I think sometimes we make it mean things about ourselves that it's not actually true. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
in that scenario, if you were given proof time and time again that the people aren't going to receive your voice, your ideas, it's not that you're not being brave or courageous, you're being smart because
Mm.
you're not putting yourself in a situation to be, you know what I mean, to create. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so I feel like in those situations, it's really taking stock of what your own core values are, and is the organization, is the corporation that you are associated with aligned with that? Because if
Yeah.
it's not aligned with that, you have a choice. And I know this sounds very like no, there's no other job, or it's hard. And 100%, like 100% honor that. But then that's where you have a choice. How am I going to realign so that where I am right now isn't something where I'm in constant imposter, constant self-doubt, constant, how can I shift my perspective? What are the ways in which I can, be brave and be courageous within the environment that I'm in? It's like we wouldn't show up naked to a funeral. Do you know what I mean? Like I want to wear a bikini to well, we wouldn't do that because that's the rules of engagement at a funeral, and so we honor that. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? So I think it's about looking at what are the things where, how can we honor ourselves, but also acknowledging that we've chosen to honor the rules of engagement of the corporation or the environment or the scenario that's there. And that's where it comes to be like, what are those lines in the sand for you? What are you willing to sacrifice? What are you not willing to sacrifice? And how can you play within that?
Yeah. And just thinking about the funeral kind of analogy, like where do you push the boundaries a bit? Because, if the person was very colourful and, normally rule of engagement is you turn up in black, do you push the boundaries a little bit by turning up in honor of that person with a bit more colour on? It's that kind of thing, right?
And I think that's where it's so nuanced, right? It's so nuanced with the and obviously there will be like someone who just truly does not care about the rules of engagement and show up and do whatever they want, and all the
Yeah.
power to them. All
Yeah.
the power to them. But I think this is where, for me at least, there's this level of respect or this level of understanding or this level of um it all comes at what I'm willing to sacrifice and not sacrifice for myself. You know what I mean? What are the things I'm willing to compromise on, and what are
Mhm.
the things that are non-negotiables for me?
Yeah.
And that's what determines the, you know what I mean?
Next step, what you do.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I love that. And there's almost like I wish I'd found you earlier as I transitioned from that world
Mm,
into the world of like having your own business, entrepreneurship, whatever you want to call it. Because this, like, there's almost like a safety in a sense. Like in hindsight, there was still an element of safety because I could say the thing or not say the thing, and I'm still going to get paid at the end of the day, right? Unless
yeah.
I did something terrible. And then here I am, if I don't say the thing, I'm probably not going to get paid because I'm not being that true. I'm not bringing into existence the things that I want to like share with the world and
Hmm.
have people to hear. So like that transition was huge for me. And I'm 7 years in and I'm really only just through things like opening my mouth and speaking on a podcast. I've been very open about this. My very first podcast was just to get me talking, just to
Yeah.
get me open my mouth and like start to share my views with the world, right? This one has been way more intentional, but still it's a practice. It's a practice of noticing when, I'm trying to be too scripted or too professional, or I actually get to the end of it and I didn't make the point I really wanted to make. And why did I not do that? Did it not like, so it brings up so much stuff, right? When you
Hmm.
actually, especially us in personal brands, we are our person as a business. And I know you'll talk about your business evolution in a minute, but um those kind of rules and those terms of engagement that we learn through the corporate world, especially, cannot necessarily serve us in our own
No,
business.
exactly.
And so it's a whole load of other boxes we've got to break out of and rules we've got to break, right?
Yeah. And I think what you said there, Emma, about like starting your podcast first just to start using your voice, that it's yes, yes. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's so, it's so important because it's, we have to be willing, like, you know, the saying, like you got to be willing to suck in order to become a master. Like you got to be willing to not be good at something to become good at it. Like,
Yeah.
and you know the cost of engagement is embarrassment or whatever those cliche sayings are. But we won't. Oftentimes we spend too much time thinking about these breaking these rules and thinking about what we want to do and thinking about how we're going to do it, and all of that thinking is just a projection based on who we are right now. It's
Hmm.
not actually the truth of when we're actually in the moment and doing it. And so each of those moments where you look back and like, oh, I was being too scripted. Okay, that's not bad or wrong. That's just giving you another piece of the puzzle. It's just giving you another opportunity to go, okay, what was it about? Why did I feel I need that script? What was it? What did I really want to say? And I think it's really about just letting ourselves be messy, letting ourselves make mistakes, letting ourselves learn. Like all of these like failures, failures, fuck ups and faux pas, like though it's part of the process. And so I think it's just like as entrepreneurs, when we're moving from a corporate or a career into our own business, we have to really pay attention to those unconscious rules that we bring with us, because so many of us, we want the freedom to be who we are. We want the freedom to do what we want and say what we want and how we want and when we want. And then when we are given that freedom, we're like, I don't know what the fuck to do. How do I do it? Like we go back into wanting the job
Yeah.
description
Yeah.
when really it's really just about like just doing and being and expressing.
Yeah. And that's, I think, the biggest thing. And that's what, like, I always say, thanks for the loving smackdown and the kick up the bum that you give me.
Yeah.
Because it is like, I have spent years thinking about how I could just be doing things differently. And actually, the only way we're gonna is that trial and error, right? Of the three line. It's like
Yeah.
just put it out, put something out there. It's one bit of content, it's one podcast episode, it's one post, put it out there, and then get back up the next day and do another one. Like do it again. And just through that, you're learning to hone that muscle, to like hone that voice and all the things. So I love that, and I appreciate you for the loving smackdowns over the last year and going into this year, because I ain't going nowhere. So tell us, I feel like we could talk about this, like there's so much we could talk about, and maybe it's a conversation for later on in the year, but tell us all the sexy things you've done with your brand, and like just give us the like overview of how you work with people moving forward and how people can get hold of you.
Yeah. All right. So yes, this episode is being recorded the morning after I like quote unquote officially released the new brand and the new signature space in the new brand. For my entire business career, I've used Goals and Grapes was the first one, and then I transitioned into my name, Kari Russell Coaching. I am Kari Russell, just using my name. And at the end of the summer last year, I had a very divine intervention moment, and felt this, it's like you don't know what you don't know until you know. And it was in that moment I realized how I had actually been pigeonholing myself. So the SX, my old brand, or as of yesterday's brand, was very edgy, very provocative, very black, white, and red, very focused, and unknowingly very niched, all around self-expression, branding, identity, but really around self-expression. And how I would say it's not so much the content that I was feeling stifled in, it was the expression of the content,
Mm.
and how my brand had really, almost where I felt like I had to be cheeky, I had to be provocative, I had to be, double entendres with my wording and with things, because that was the impact that I was making, was this, this provocation. I really wanted to, like, you know, gut punch people. And it's still part of me. It's still part of my brand. It's still part of me. But it had become all of my brand. And so I didn't realize that I was feeling this way until I realized I was feeling this way. And I started to play and really, remind lots of different things happened over the last 6 to 8 months, where I was reminded of past versions of myself, past identities, past roles, past skills that I had used. And it started to, like, oh, right, I forgot about that. Or, oh my gosh, I haven't talked about that, or haven't shared that, or haven't expressed that in so long. Or, why have I been hiding that part of myself, but not consciously hiding? It was almost like just forgotten about. So when this new brand came through, and it was not about me, it was about creating a community, creating a space for women specifically, but for all individuals, to really give themselves that permission to be all of who they are, to play in all of who they are, to be contradictory, to be bold and spicy and provocative, and also warm and sappy and silly, and not, again, everything that I talk about and stand for, but in a more open and expressive brand now. So Club Yellow is the new brand. And again, yellow, the color yellow, the way it came through, and it, I could talk for hours about it. So I'm not gonna give the backstory, but the new brand is Club Yellow. And like Club Yellow, it's a club. And we think about, like, originally when it was like Babysitter's Club, the books and the stories, and and how individual, differentiated the characters were in that story. Having like a clubhouse, a space to come and explore, and that permission to take the masks off, to let go of the shoulds, to color outside the lines, like truly just a place of permission, a place to be and explore, expand, and express,
Mm.
is really what Club Yellow is all around. And then where this cheeky, spicy, salty side of me gets to still play within Club Yellow is in the yellow high heel. And the yellow high heel is an SX club. It's a virtual SX club. And I do have, future plans for in-person and retreats and stuff, but right now it's virtual. And it kind of stemmed from my love of spicy romance novels, and the awakening that I've had from reading and learning and shifting my perspective. But it's like, when you step inside the yellow high heel, there's different rooms that you get to enter. And so the rooms are all very different. There's a very different vibe, a very different energy, very different focus. There's mindset. There's like power and an embodiment. There's playing around with your expression and getting creative and messy. There's a visionary room where it's all about going in and envisioning and really looking at what it is that you want. There's it's like a club, and every room you enter, it's a different experience for you, and it gives you that permission to have polarizing personalities, to have different ways of wanting to be that bold ass baddie, but also wanting to be this, like, soft and warm and nurturing soul, and wanting to be this, like, loud and out there persona, but also wanting to have the like hermit energy and the quiet and the calm. So this club yellow and the yellow high heel is truly just the uh, uh, awareness and expansion of all of my own, identities and versions of me. And it's just inviting other women to come play with me now. Right. So the tagline for Club Yellow is come as you are, come as you are, evolve as you play. There's very much this playful giving ourselves that permission to play. And then the yellow high heel, it's the tagline is dare to enter, because it's a daring place to be. So yeah,
Do
it
you
feels so
dare?
good. It
Do
feels so
you
good.
dare to enter? It sounds amazing. And I'm super excited to see how it all unfolds for you. And of course, I'm
Oh,
there. I'm in it.
in
I'm
it.
coming in, diving in. Love that. Thank you so much. And so I know we're just doing a switch over of handles on Instagram and stuff, but we'll make sure the show notes are reflective of where
Okay.
you land.
Amazing.
Um,
Thank you.
but you're on Instagram and TikTok, right?
Yes.
Main.
Instagram and TikTok. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Carrie, thank you so much for coming. I really do want to continue this conversation, and I do feel like maybe it's, 6 to 9 months down the line where things have like really started to evolve for you, and like you've got some like we can continue this conversation.
100%.
Thank you
Thank
so
you so
much.
much. This has been great. And thank you to your audience. Thank you.
Yay.
Thank
And
you. Love
until
you.
next time, guys,
Okay.
take care.